All right, everyone. Well, welcome in. Good to see everybody. Go ahead and get ready to roll here today. Got a couple things to talk about today. The topic is continuing on with that which we've talked about last week, and that is preparing umpires for the upcoming season. Last week, we would have spent a lot of time talking about the mental and physical part of preparing for the season. And then today, we'll talk a little bit about building our program. And many of you guys are in positions of leadership within your programs, within your districts, or maybe even within a region. I just want to give us some ideas and an opportunity to reflect upon that which we are doing, that which we've experienced, and then really kind of make a list and be thoughtful about how exactly we have seen programs structured, and then ultimately be able to advise our own programs as to how exactly to help build a program and things like that. So building a program is our focal point here today. I'll probably save the pandemic side, the pandemic context, for next week, and we'll talk about how to navigate all this through a pandemic more so next week. But today, really focus on building a program really in three different areas: a culture, the idea of recruiting, and then obviously retention of umpires. Before we go ahead and get into things, I do have a couple announcements here just to make sure everybody is aware of some things that are upcoming to us. First of all, and Tom, you can speak to this a little bit here as well, but be on the lookout for in your umpire registry portal. We'll have, and Tom's getting ready to roll out with the help of the West and many other umpires in positions of leadership throughout different regions, are all going to be ready to go ahead and deliver a pretty comprehensive rules webinar series over each rule, and that's going to be done throughout February and early March. And Tom, I'll give you a second here to go ahead and talk a little bit about that one.
Thanks, Stu. Hello, everyone. I hope everyone's health is holding up. Yes, beginning in February, we're going to launch a series of webinars covering the rule book, and the decision was made by headquarters to open those webinars up. So hopefully we will also have some coaches, maybe some DAs and league officials to school them a little bit on the rules. The webinars will function like any of the others you may have seen. You'll be able to ask questions for clarification. We will record them all and archive them in the registry, and they'll be available to you as potential teaching tools in the future or just for your own review. That's it, Stu.
All right, cool. So be on the lookout for those, and especially for those of you guys that were really asking about some rules-specific stuff. I think that's going to be a huge help in preparing yourselves and others for the upcoming season. So I'm excited to take a look at those throughout February and then early March. The other thing that I also dropped, I think it was in the Little League Umpires group, and I also then just copied the post on into the Central Region Facebook group, and that is that the Strike 3 podcast is getting ready to have a series of podcasts next week beginning January 21st all the way through the 24th. And that podcast will focus on exactly what we talked about last week, the mental and physical preparations that we'll make. They've got a College World Series physician that'll be in to talk about navigating it through a pandemic and what exactly that looks like with health protocols and some suggestions there. They've got a psychologist that's coming in to not only talk about like the psychology of officiating, but that's also true like on and off the field and what exactly that does. So a lot of good information there for us, and the whole idea of pressure, anxiety, and developing your points of focus for improvements and things like that. And then the last individual that they'll have on, we actually spoke about and presented a lot of her ideas, Danny Proenza from Anything is Possible Fitness out in Las Vegas, Nevada. She'll be on to talk about the physical preparations and probably once again break down a little bit more about the strength, conditioning, agility, and nutrition plans that umpires should follow too. I'll link that eventually either in the chat, and for those of you guys that'll catch it on replay, I'll link it in the description as well, so that you guys have a link to the podcast and also a link to the sign up. But you'll have to sign up for that webinar with the Strike 3 podcast and a really good deeper dive into a lot of the concepts that we would have talked about then last week on preparing mentally and physically for the season. The last thing that I'll go ahead and talk about before we go ahead and launch into the conversation here today is just to reset back to what we talked a little bit about last week, the mental and physical preparations. Remember, mentally, I kind of challenge you guys towards the end of it to think a little bit about what specifically you want to improve upon here in 2021. And that's something specific on the field. It can also be something specific to umpiring that you have to do off the field. But think about 2 or 3 things here and kind of chew on that over the next week or so. We'll probably start to share out those ideas as well. well. What exactly do you want to improve upon in the 2021 season? Like I said, my last few years I've focused on proper use of eyes to give me proper timing. This year my focal point then will likely be on continuing to grow in the wedge, particularly with quiet steps and getting better at anticipating and making that a little bit more natural. But for you, think about what exactly those mean. Make a list, write them down, share them with somebody, and that way you can go ahead and hit 2021 with a point of focus and a point of intensity to make some improvements in your game on the field and even potentially off the field. Lastly, then the physical part of things too. I'm in week 2 of my program, and I've still not yet missed a day, which is great news on strength and fitness and nutrition and things like that. So I continue to make sure that you write down an action plan, whether it be for your mental goals or your physical goals, and then even find somebody else, share those ideas with somebody, find a buddy so that you have a system of accountability brought into that one too. So just kind of circle back to those things and still make that a highlight here, especially in January where it's super cold. We can obviously then spend some time getting ready physically and mentally for the season and be just as excited about those things as hopefully we will be later on in the spring. Now, today's conversation then is turning the page towards building a program. And as I mentioned, for the most part, we'll focus on 3 major areas: the culture of an umpire program, and then ultimately recruiting and retaining. And for many of us in positions of leadership or potentially coming out of or going into these positions, I think you'll find a thing or two here worthwhile for you to go ahead and use, not only in umpire programs, but potentially in other areas of your life as well. So I'm excited to go ahead and dig into those topics here today. Now, what I would really like to do for the most part today is engage in some collaborative conversations. So throughout the day here today, we'll have some time then to speak with one another and kind of dig into what we've all experienced. And we'll start with what I'm going to start to label as the pregame conference, if you will, where I split you guys up into breakout rooms and you guys go ahead and share some ideas with each other there. So I'm going to get ready to go ahead and put you into breakout rooms. And just like we did, there are 2 questions that I want you to go ahead and discuss in your breakout rooms. The first of which is just to kind of obviously introduce yourself. But the first question I'd like you to go ahead and discuss is how or why did you get involved in umpiring? So how or why did you get involved in umpiring? Try and make that like because I think, some of us could probably talk for 10 minutes a piece on that one. Try and make that a concise version, but reflect upon that here because we want to take that information, that context, and then start to consider that when we talk about building an umpire program. So question number 1, how and why did you go ahead and get involved in umpiring? And then secondly, what's made you stay involved? So how did you get involved? What's made you stay involved in umpiring as well? And again, as we talk about recruiting, building a program, and retaining, I think our own personal experiences, whether they be with umpiring or anything else, those 2 questions, why did I get involved, why did I stay involved, are 2 that we can obviously circle back to and be mindful of as we design and advise on program development here. The last thing then to go ahead and point out before I put you into breakout rooms here is to have somebody that's going to kind of like record answers or at least kind of make some notations of some things, because when we come back, I'll ask each group to kind of share out some of those ideas as well. So 2 questions to go ahead and debate and at least discuss. And remember, try and keep those at least to a minimum here. Probably give you about 5 or 6 minutes here to go ahead and start on that one. I'll give you a 1-minute warning, and then we'll come back here to talk about all those things. So again, 2 questions. How and why did you get involved in umpiring? And secondly, what made you stay involved here? So I'll get ready to go ahead and put us into those groups here now, and then we'll come back out and talk about those things here in just a second. So let me go ahead and get these breakout rooms organized here. So we're going to assign automatically. Let's say here that we're going to go with 6. All right. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and throw you guys into those breakout rooms now. I'll give you about 5 minutes or so. Again, 2 questions. How did you get involved in umpiring, or why did you get involved in umpiring? And secondly, why exactly did you stay involved? Then we'll meet back together here in about 5 minutes or so. I'm opening up all those rooms now, so you guys will probably be asked to be invited, and you guys can go ahead and get started. I'll pop in, and then just make sure that you've got a recorder. All right. Okay, well, as guys are getting populated into those rooms, the reason why I want to do this for those of us that are catching this on replay is obviously to, number 1, revisit our experiences and what makes us passionate about umpiring, to make that the forefront of a lot of the things then that we are trying to design in an umpire program. So I want to be mindful of those things, give people an opportunity to reflect upon those, and then share out those ideas once we come back together in the conversation of, what exactly do we want to do and use when we build those umpire programs. So I'm going to go ahead and pop into a couple of these different rooms, ask some people to go ahead and share out and give us an idea here of what exactly then they have experienced and why exactly they umpire and why exactly they have stayed involved. So we'll go ahead and jump into some of these meetings here now.
That's neither here nor there. We got to talk about umpiring.
Yeah, we do.
Who wants to go first?
I'll go and get started. Why did I get involved? Frankly, a friend of mine who was in charge of trying to recruit some umpires asked me if I'd do it. And I was dumb enough to say yes. And what made me stay involved was the people that I was doing it with. And I just, you grow to love the game of baseball the more you do it. I did take a 10-year hiatus at one point, 9 or 10 years, which that was primarily because work changed and suddenly my time constraints got a little more difficult and didn't get as much support as we had been used to getting from our league and from our district administrator. When those things changed, I came back into it because I realized how much I was missing doing it.
Where are you from, Jeff?
Taiwan originally.
Okay. I'm from Michigan District 10. Looking at the hand, this is how we show you where you are in Michigan. Unlike those people in Ohio. The 3 northern counties at the tip of the Lower Peninsula are District 13, and I'm 10,000 square miles across.
I think I grew up in your district. I grew up in Manistee.
Okay, okay, so you know the district then.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm right here.
We didn't have Little League in my town then, but yeah.
Okay.
I'm in District 2.
Good weather down here. I hate to brag, 75 and sunny. But our season starts next week, so this is awesome. But I got started when I was 14 years old. My father was a president of our local Little League and needed some umpires on a senior game. And being a can you guys still hear me?
Yep.
All right. So being a president, he needed somebody. And my brother and I had been watching baseball on TV, emulating the umpires forever. And he just kind of threw us back there with a balloon and some shin guards and indicator and a mask. And my brother and I, we got the bug. So we've always stayed in Little League ever since I was 14. So it's over 40 years of umpiring. And the reason I love to do it is it's just like to stay in the game. The baseball's in your heart, and that's the reason why you love it and continue to do it.
What Little League stood for and just about the culture of Little League as a whole. So I haven't accepted pay and very, very quickly on in the career. So it's very much a sense of me to give back. The true volunteer aspect. It's something I find a lot of joy and a lot of pride in is being a volunteer at all times. And just honestly doing it for the kids, doing it for the local leagues. How we do it in District 6 in Indiana is a little bit different. And we're able to give back to all of the leagues, not necessarily just one. So I think it's, I find a lot of joy in that.
Yeah, one of the reasons, go ahead, Rex, I'm sorry.
And with me, me being in the military, wherever I was stationed, I always found a league. If it was overseas, I found a league. If I wasn't in California, I found a league.
Mm-hmm.
And I always stepped up to the plate and said, hey, let me work a couple games. I may be only in port a week or two, but there I am.
Yeah.
Well, and you're inside. It's wintertime. You're inside. The weather's not a factor. That's nice.
Couldn't be cooler. Stu, hey, bud.
Hey, how are you guys? How's your conversation been?
Good.
As you can see, going.
Going well.
Good. What
Jeff, did you just say that you Jeff, did you just say that you do swimming?
I do.
How's that work?
I'm going to say on the scale of how easy it is to officiate a sport, it's probably one of the easiest. almost, I'd say 95% administrative.
Okay, we're going to go ahead and get ready to come back to the breakout rooms here now. So I didn't realize I was muted here. So we'll come back from the breakout rooms. Everybody will share some of those ideas and get us started here back with those. So I'm going to go ahead and end the breakout rooms now, and that'll get everybody then repopulated back in here so we can kind of hear exactly why people kind of have gotten involved in Little League and why they have stayed involved. So about a minute here for people to go ahead and come back in from the breakout rooms. All righty. See everybody starting to pop back in, which is a good thing to see from everybody. And as everybody's coming back in, obviously the conversation we had was focused on two major questions. Number one, why did you get involved in umpiring, or what made you get involved? Heard some great testimonies, and probably have heard a lot of similar answers. And then secondly, what's kept you involved? So what I want to do here now is very quickly and kind of give you about 30 seconds per each group. So I'll just, call on a group of people here, and whoever's in that group, if you guys just want to step up, unmute yourself and kind of share, not necessarily what got you into umpiring, but just some of the common themes or some of the things that you guys talked about. So really all I'm looking for is just a summary here of what got you into umpiring, what's kept you into umpiring, so that we can be mindful of it as we design and build those programs. So the first group I'm going to come to was group one for me, and Eric, George, Sam, and Pete, you guys were in that one. So if any one of you guys wants to unmute and just kind of talk to us very quickly about what you guys talked about in your conversations, that'll work.
Well, all four had unique reasons, but if you could summarize it into some basic ones, you had a personal connection with someone that pulled you in, or you had the opportunity to get involved into it. And once you get into it, those personal connections and just the love of the game in general seems to be what keeps you into it. Pete had mentioned the science of the game and getting to understand the rules and all the unique situations, and how you can particularly have a situation come up that you may never see again on a ball field. And anybody that's called 9, 10-year-olds knows that can happen every day. But those are some of the reasons.
Yeah, absolutely. Group two, I had Dave, Steve, Jeff, and Charlie in that group. If one of you guys wants to unmute and summarize real quickly what got you guys all into it and what's kept you in, very similar. Good job there, George.
We had, people had to do some community service for non-criminal activities, not naughty boys. A couple of child was playing. In my case, it was because of my girlfriend was playing, and this ages me, back when Little League first started softball, way back when. And I showed up at a game and I got hooked into umpiring. And I had an older guy take me under his wing. And his kid was done playing. He just wanted to stay involved. And part of it is it defines who we are, who our friends are. And what's kind of funny with Steve is I can go on a webinar, something like this. And even though he's in Virginia over by Dulles Air Force Base, he's originally from my district.
Oh, wow. Cool.
And that's some of the cool things you get when you come on to these things or meet. You're surprised how much you find out that you don't know about other people, or the things you have in common.
Yeah, and those relationships definitely keep us involved here. Group number three, Be Wild, you, Gerard, Mike, and Tom were on in that group. So if any one of you guys wants to unmute and share what you guys talked about real briefly, I'd appreciate it.
Great. Well, thanks for doing this. And I'm the scribe for group number three. And George hit it, the how did you get involved? I think he hit it right in the head. The personal aspect of the game. Tom said his kids got him involved. Brian said his father was a league president. So that personal aspect. And the second part, why do you stay involved? And there were a couple things that came out of that, but I think the fundamental thing for those who stay involved and want to give back to the program is an understanding that being an umpire or being an official or being committed to a program isn't for everybody. So for those who get the bug and stay in that vein, there's a good road ahead. So those are the two things. Thank you.
Thanks, Gerard. Group 4 here, DJ, Rex, Tony, and if any one of you guys from that group wants to go ahead and share out too, I'd appreciate it.
Yeah, so from our group, Rex and DJ, their fathers were umpires and got them involved. Me, it was my son, so it was that family, and LJ was with us as well. And LJ's, if I remember correctly, he got involved because he saw the umpiring and there was a lot of abuse going on and calls wrong, and he's like, I got to get in here, and he helped jump into that. But I would say to the T, all of us, the reason why we stay in is for two things. One, it's to give back to the community, and two, for the love of the game.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Those are good points. Thanks, Tony. Group 5, Dale, Jeff, Mitch, and Noah. What you guys talk a little bit about?
So for Dale had said that he had retired a couple years ago, was looking for something to do, and he had started out officiating basketball, and he wanted something to keep him busy for the summer. So he ended up going into baseball and getting into Little League. Dale, I think you said that this upcoming summer will be your second year, correct?
Yeah, this will be my second formal year.
Hell of a year to start out.
30 years ago, I was umpiring games that weren't really official Little League games and things like that. But this will be the second official year. So,
well, you chose a great year to start out with, that being the year of the pandemic. So, I know you made that choice all by yourself. No, I'm just kidding. And then I think we had Jeff as well. And Jeff had said, actually, and this is something that I wasn't familiar with, but Jeff had said that he had gotten into umpiring because it was actually an obligation of his, because he was coaching a 12U team. And he had said that actually it was a mandate that if you were a coach, you also had to umpire within your local Little League program. Within my local Little League program that I umpire in, it's actually the same one I also played in. We've never done that. So I didn't know if that was kind of a Little League thing in other programs, but I definitely found that interesting. So I'm going to look more into that.
Yeah. Well, cool. That's good stuff. Group 6, Chris, Rob, and Tom, what you guys talk a little bit about?
Tom and Chris basically continued on after their kids got done playing and to stay involved in the game. Myself, my dad was a vice president of a local league, and when I stopped playing, he said, you need something to do, and they need umpires. And I think for all of us, staying involved in the game and the relationships you build and working with different groups and meeting different people from different backgrounds is always fun. Personally, on my note, I stay involved just because I get to hang out with Sam at state tournaments and regional tournaments.
Yeah, I believe it. Well, guys, I think you all hit a lot of common themes there about how to get involved, and then really what's kept you involved has been your relationships. And I think that's probably been a staple and ultimately a testament in all my experiences in Little League. But what I would like to at least make sure that we're aware of here, and I took notes, and I think I've asked a couple other people to take notes too, is I'm going to put all that stuff in a document and then share it eventually too. But those reasons why people get involved and stay involved. That's a great list for you to start with and thinking about building your program, about recruiting, and about retaining those umpires as well. So, as you kind of think about whether or not you're a local league UIC or a district UIC, understanding what has attracted many people to this avocation and what's kept them into it is paramount before you even start to think about beginning that program. Now, I just dropped in the chat a link, and if people want to take a look at that, that's fine. For those of us watching on replay, I'll put it in the description here too, and I'll go ahead and share on my screen here with you as well. But in preparation for today's meeting, what I did was I went ahead and tried to list everything that could come to mind for me about building a program. And I'm not going to insult your intelligence and read this to you here, but I want it to be used as a resource. And really, this isn't an end-all be-all type resource either. I want it to be used to expand upon in our conversation here as well. So, as we get ready to go ahead and go through this, I've kind of highlighted some of the things that in conversations with other people around the country that they have really kind of highlighted here as well. But I think one of the biggest things for us to kind of consider here is that number one, you got to get yourself right first. And you can't lead a program and you can't lead people if you don't have a vision, goals, and expectation and a plan. That's what breeds trust in that position from like the board of directors and things like that. And then also that's kind of what validates you as a leader as well from the people in which you lead. Secondly, a lot of people, and I've seen this time and time again, take the role of a UIC because they think that they can get their pick of the litter of games, and this will be the key to them getting to do the best games with the best teams and this, that, and the other. But realistically, that's not our purpose. Our purpose is to acquire and develop talent, and therefore that means here that we've got to create opportunities for those that we lead to grow. And if one of our goals as an umpire in chief is to take the pick of the litter, so to speak, of what's available, we're doing a huge disservice then to those that we lead. And if there is no opportunity for growth for people that we lead, they're probably going to go ahead and hop on out. So that's definitely one thing to think about. And then the other thing too, who is your trusted counsel? I think that's a big question as well. Realize that you're not alone. This may be your board of directors. It may also be people in other districts, maybe somebody on this phone call as well. But somebody to bounce those ideas off of as well. A couple other things there with recruiting and retaining ideas. I've got some things highlighted. Like you guys mentioned, it's people and relationships that both build and sustain a program. People and relationships that both build and sustain your program, and therefore we must invest in our people. Heard a lot of people talk about this volunteer-based program, that it's an avocation, and essentially volunteer means that we are donating our time and that which we can afford to give rather than being required to give that time. So respecting that time, I think, is a big thing there. Being respectful of other people's time by being proactive in communication, advanced scheduling as much as possible, and just keeping people in the loop. People appreciate that one as well. Another major thing for a lot of successful programs has been creating a meritocracy specifically for advancement. As I mentioned here, people don't want to stay in an organization to where there is limited growth. And at the same time, that growth and that promotion has to be merit-based, and evaluation is essentially what we're talking about. So those metrics, those analytics that we maybe use that can discuss how people know where they stand, I think is a big piece of it. So go ahead and think about those things as well. How do people know where they stand? That's through evaluation. And that evaluation can't just be done on a piece of paper and submitted to somebody. That's got to be a conversation, an individual conversation. And that, again, is how you build relationships with people, number one, and then how you sustain growth and really make then those relationships the forefront of that umpire program there. So again, I'm not going to go ahead and spend more time reading through these things and stuff like that. And there's a lot of stuff that we'll revisit next week when we start to talk about recruiting and things like that in a pandemic. But nonetheless, here, I just went through and highlighted a lot of the things that have been redundant themes in many of the conversations that I've had with other people who are in positions of leadership, either at the local or the district levels. And then here in the last part of that too, this resource too, I've got the 5 pillars of developing an umpire program, some things to keep in mind and some strategies. So really kind of tying together some of those ideas that I have in the first page of this one, and with some specific strategies as to how to execute these at both the local and the district level. So culture, one of those pillars, and then the last 4 are all ours. And a lot of this comes from the West and their Train the Trainer clinic too. Recruit, retain, recognize, and reward. And if you think back to a lot of the programs, whether they be umpires, whether they be jobs or things like that, a lot of those successful programs and the ones that you enjoyed being a part of most likely did a lot of these things here. And I think that's important to think about and reflect upon before we even get to the keyboard and start typing up things or sending out emails or recruiting as well. So just wanted to give everybody a beginning platform of a resource to use. And then my goal here over the next week or two is to take some input from you, from the notes that I've had too, and then some of the things that you guys will share this week and next week, to kind of continue to grow this document so that we all have then something to reference and something to use, whether we're trying to plan our own programs or trying to advise other people as well. So I think you'll find that one useful to go ahead and go through. And again, won't insult your intelligence in broadcasting through that as well. Now, like I said here, I think what's important for us to realize here, and one thing that I want you to think about as we head into next week is this question. And DJ, I'm going to put you on the spot here in just a second to answer this question. Then we'll go ahead and wrap things up here. But what I want you to think about, and what we'll start our conversation with next week here, is specific then to, what's one thing or two things, one or two things that you've experienced in an umpire program that you think all programs should be doing. So in thinking for next week, or just thinking in general, what's one thing that a successful program has done that you've appreciated that you think all programs should do? And what I want to do is make a list of those. So you can either email them to me if you wanted to. You can hold off until next week and drop them into the chat if you wanted to as well. But I'm really interested in building and increasing that list as to, one thing that everybody was a part of that they think another program should be doing too. And I think for those of us in positions of leadership, we'll find that list very valuable as we continue to evolve, build, and structure our program and make changes. So think about that question for next week. Either drop them in the chat next week, or you can drop them obviously in an email to me. But what's one thing that your umpire program is doing that you think all umpire programs should do? DJ, I told him that I would put him on the spot, and I'll ask him this question, and just to kind of get us some food for thought moving into answering that question independently. But DJ was an umpire of mine, both at the local level when I was a local UIC and then a district UIC, and then he's still in the region here. So he's kind of gotten to see my growth throughout the course of time. And DJ, just from your perspective, what is one or a few things that you appreciated most about the program that has really kind of kept you involved in things like that? So DJ, I'll let you answer that question. Oh, is DJ there?
There we go. Sorry.
Okay.
I think a couple things stick out initially. One, I always know where I stood when it came to evaluations and feedback. So whether that's at the local level, getting constant evaluations on paper with feedback and things I needed to work on, trying to progress through the district levels and move up into achieving district staff, and then being held accountable, not even at district staff, I'm there. The expectation of almost perfection, we demand a high level of excellence. That expectation increased more. It wasn't, oh, you made it, now it's chill. But I always knew where I stood. And that's really important to me as far as being a goal-oriented person. And then the second thing that I'll highlight for me actually had nothing to do with the baseball field at all. Always after every district game, after any games, we would always go out to dinner. The whole crew would go out to dinner. And I think that breeded a culture of just togetherness, camaraderie, and that's those dinners are sometimes sticking to my head, and some of the experiences that we've had. And I see some guys nodding their heads like they like to. I see you, Sammy. You like to go eat. Sometimes those dinners and those adult pops after the game are sometimes a little bit better than the game itself. Because while we have the avocation and we want to be perfect on the field and do our very best, it still shows that we have a sense of togetherness. We are friends and just a good group of guys wanting to get together. So I think for me, being a goal-oriented person, knowing where I stood and having good, consistent feedback and evaluations. But the second thing to me was the off the field camaraderie. So those are two things that stick out for me.
Yeah, I'll recap what DJ said, and then Tom, I'll ask you, Tom Rawlings, I'll ask you to kind of share your thoughts here on our conversation so far today. But Eric pointed out a couple things in the chat, and I just want to draw attention to them because there's some really good points there. And this is also incorporating DJ's idea here about knowing where he stood regarding evaluations. And those evaluations, and Eric said this, need to be as objective as possible, meaning then that we are making sure that what is being communicated is going to be an area for growth. And then secondly, that we specifically, and especially in position of leadership, take responsibility for the how. So essentially an evaluation, yes, can be a list of, hey, this is what needs to be worked upon. But the other part of that then too is this is how we're going to get there. And instead of trying to make a bunch of things a goal and to fix a bunch of things, really boil it down to ultimately what is going to spur growth in other areas too. So I think evaluation and communicating where you stand are two huge points. But at the same time, it's not just listing those for someone to look at. It's having that conversation and making sure that that person with whom you're evaluating knows the plan, knows the path that they have to do. And this is what I mean by not moving the goalposts in that document, that we're not consistently, moving the goalpost on somebody, the endpoint, the finish line for somebody, but they know exactly the path to get there. And they know that you, the evaluator, are going to be a part of that in helping them grow and develop in each step of the way. So great touch on there. And like he says, it's 90% useless if you just give them, this is what I do. But ultimately, yes, this is what you do. This is how we're going to improve upon it. And that is a huge thing to go ahead and touch base with. Tom, Mr. Rawlings, I'll come to you here. Just some thoughts here on building an umpire program and things that we've talked about here. And then I'll wrap things up. So the floor is all yours, Tom.
Thank you. Yeah, first of all, good stuff. And Eric, I agree with your comments on evaluations that are next to useless. That's why, Stu was part of the group that began to revise Little League's evaluation into a standard form that we're hoping is taking personalities out of things and dealing with what can be analytically looked at and improved. And we're trying to push that tool and system down as far as possible, all the way to the local level, hopefully. On another matter, going back to what DJ said, and I see Sammy's on the conversation. In 2011, Sam and I had a chance to have several of those after game dinners and discussions, and absolutely correct. I think that's where you have an opportunity for growth that we certainly shouldn't just abandon. And finally, I've had the ability over the course of my years to get people involved almost accidentally in the local league tournaments and local district tournaments. Other umpires would show up to just watch. And if we had 4 guys there and 2 showed up to look, we would turn us into a 6-man crew and plug those guys in for perhaps what might have been their first tournament experience. So I think we have to look for opportunities, going back to Stu's point, to help people grow. When we least expect that opportunity is going to be there, it presents itself. So stay aware of those.
Yeah, those are all great pieces. And like we've all shared, like it's the relationships that matter the most. And the working games part of it is a huge piece of, the reward. That's, ideally why we all get involved into it. But what keeps us involved and what enables our programs to grow is the relationships that are forged. So continue to think about when you work your program, what exactly do you do to help build those relationships as well, whether it be an evaluation and those conversations and outlining a path, kind of you in this together. But also then what do you do off the field? It can be dinners. I know that oftentimes when I was a district UIC, I invited all my umpires over to my house right before the district tournament started. We had a cookout, reviewed mechanics and points of emphasis, and we invited our families to come to those as well. We'd set up cornhole and everything else. I've also seen programs that play wiffle ball, for example, at the park one Sunday afternoon as well. So think about ways then here that just allow you for those opportunities to, number one, push and continue to be demanding and things like that as a leader, but secondly, also then foster that relationship piece too. So a lot of good things to think about. And again, that document is linked in the chat. I'll link it again when I send out the email, and I'll put it, like I said, into the description when I post the replay link. A couple things in closing. First of all, thank you for everyone, to everyone for their willingness to share some of those ideas and those concepts here as we think about building and maintaining our umpire programs. We'll meet same time, same place next week. Focus a little bit more on catching things up. Remember that one question that I posed. Number one, what is one thing that your program does that all programs should be doing? We'll start with that question. So be prepared for that one next week. And then we'll also then start to take a look then at how exactly building a program looks a little bit differently here amid the pandemic. Last minute reminders here for me. Remember the umpire registry, as Tom talked about, to get our mind right over the rules. That's coming up to us. So take a look at the umpire registry for registration. It's not out just yet. Probably will be out in the next couple weeks or so. But those are for each rules, those clinics then, those virtual clinics coming to us through Little League Baseball and through the umpire registry in February and in March. Don't forget about the Strike 3 podcast, January 21st through the 24th. You do have to register for that one. I'll include the link in the description and in the email that I send out as well. So that way you guys can get registered for a deeper dive into preparing mentally and physically for the season. And then, like I said, continue to prepare mentally and physically. Write down your plan, execute that plan, find a buddy then as well. Now, I'm going to wrap things up here, but I'll hold on for anybody that wants to continue the conversation just as we did last week. So I'll go ahead and wrap things up here now. Again, thanks to everyone for joining us. If you've got to leave, you can go ahead and do so. I'll go ahead and end the recording here in just a second as well and send everybody on their way. But guys, again, thanks for sharing. Hopefully we've given you some ideas to think about. Use that document to kind of think about some things as you build your program, and I will continue to work to expand upon that document with everybody else's ideas and shared here today and then again next week. I'll see everyone again next week, and then I'll hold on for questions and more discussion hereafter. I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording here now. But thanks again for joining us, and we'll see everybody next week.